Good afternoon. Today we are going to have the discussion on a new chapter of organizational behavior, and the chapter is perception. If you recall, I told you in the previous lecture that perception and attitude, basically they are highly interlinked. I also told you that attitude actually derives from the perception. So perception is the basic human behavioral component based on which the attitude of the human being develops. Already we had a at length discussion on attitude. So today we are going to have a discussion on perception. Okay, here we are, the topic for today, perception. Concept of perception. What do we understand by perception? According to the theories of psychology, again, it's the elementary areas, the components are the psychology, basic psychology, from which the component of the organizational psychology or organizational behavior has developed. So, according to the concept of psychology, it is a process of interpreting something that we see or hear in our mind and use it later to judge and give a verdict on a situation, person, group, etc. So, basically, it is an impression that we develop in our mind, either through hearing something or through a past experience, but we will have some impression in our mind, and based on which, when it is actually reflected through our behavior, either favorable to a situation, person, or an event, or unfavorable to a particular situation, person, or an event, then we call it an attitude. So the reflection can be favorable, reflection can be unfavorable. That time we will call it the attitude is positive or negative, but the actual the launching pad or the platform is the perception, the impression that we develop in our mind. Process of perception. There are basically 4 steps. First one, detecting or receiving the stimuli. Stimuli, usually these are the external stimuli, or some stimuli can be internal as well. For example, if you have ever faced a very unfavorable situation, not at all comfortable for you, so that particular situation will act as an external stimuli. So you might have ever had received that stimuli in your life, and that is actually the receipt of the external stimuli. Take a very simple example. For a child or a kid, initially he will not have any knowledge about his surroundings. By mistake, if he touches a hot utensil, that experience for him will be very painful and obviously very unfavorable one or uncomfortable one. So first time he had got that experience, so that experience, external factor will actually act like a stimuli. So in case of the perception, the first step will be receipt or detection of that kind of stimuli. Stimuli can be internal as well. Selecting the received stimuli, this is also known as the perceptual selectivity. Now, you might have received multiple stimuli together. Okay, for example, just you can take the previous example. A kid has touched a hot utensil, maybe a hot kettle placed on an oven. So that will be a painful experience for him. Now, the same kid, suppose when he had some injury to any of his body parts, for example, a hand injury. So he might have experienced that his parents actually placed some warm paddings on that particular place of injury. So he will receive the same kind of external stimuli, that is heat, but in two ways. One, the situation was not comfortable for him. Second one, when some warm padding was kept on his place of injury, that gave him some relief or comfort. So the same kind of stimuli, which is basically the heat, but actually he received with two dimensions. Now it is his perception how he will look at that particular stimuli. At that point of time, the parameter on the basis of which he will judge that heat will be the intensity of the heat. He will feel at that point of time that if I touch something which is intensely hot, then I may have a skin burn. And at the same time, if he feels, or he will develop a perception that if the heat is up to the tolerance level, that at all not be uncomfortable to me, rather it may help me healing some injury as well. So you are actually making the selection based on your perception. So this is the perceptual selectivity. Now you have to organize perceptual organizing or organization. What you are doing basically, you have the multiple instances, you have multiple cases since your childhood, you are receiving this kind of external stimuli at the different points of time in your life. Now you have to have a proper organization, you have to have a proper coordination between all. You have to coordinate between the things that, okay, fine, if I receive a very intensely hot stimulus that will harm my skin, I may have a skin burn that is painful to me. And on the other hand, just now I have told you the example. So this way we can differentiate, and most importantly, we have to coordinate the cause and effect, that relationship we have to build up. A gentle warmth can heal my injury, but an intense warmth or the heat can damage my skin. So that kind of cause and effect relationship I have to build up through organizing, perceptual organizing or organization, or we can call it that this is basically the coordination phase. And finally, based on your perceptual organization, finally you will interpret. What will be your interpretation? Your reflection of behavior. Either you will stay away from any hot utensil, a hot kettle, having a boiling water placed on the oven, or you will ask someone, you will teach someone that do not go near a hot kettle, red hot kettle, it may burn your skin. So this is basically interpretation. Either you are acting or you are interpreting, you are directing someone not to do that. So these are the different 4 steps in a perception process that will finally lead us to the perception. Factors affecting perception. Just now I was talking about the external factors, stimulus. So these are the basically 4 factors. Perceptual learning based on the past experience or any special training that we get. Especially, I would relate this particular point to my previous example. Already it had been discussed at length that if you have a particular experience, based on that, our perceptual learning occurs. The second point, the mental set, refers to the preparedness or readiness to receive some sensory input. When you are waiting at a rail station and waiting for the train, obviously when you are waiting for the train, you need to stay alert whether the train is arriving or not. So what exactly you wait for? Either you wait for some announcement through the public address system, or you will wait for some train whistle. You will try to listen to it, whether a whistle is approaching near or not. If it's approaching, you will have a perception that yes, the train is coming, even if you do not see the train, but at least you will have a perception, yes, the train is approaching the station. So this is a kind of mental set. You are waiting for something, a particular special set of something. Now, the motives and the needs. Our motives and needs will definitely influence our perception. Definitely, if you are having a certain need, that will definitely help your perception. When we will actually talk about the motivation theory in future, in our next classes, at that time I will tell you that how the human need is actually helping him to have a motivation. So it is completely need based, and whether you are perceiving yourself to be motivated or not, that will be based on your need. If your need is satisfied, you will have a perception that yes, the thing is good, so he will have a motivation to that particular thing or an object or a person even. And finally, the cognitive styles. People are said to differ in ways they characteristically process the information. The processing of the information is actually the cognition, the knowledge that I acquire through my study, through my experience, through my learning. So that is basically the cognitive component. So the perception can vary. Okay, so obviously we have seen that there are the variances of perception, variation of perception in different types of people. Okay, so this can be one factor which can affect the perception. The learning is definitely going to affect your perception. If you do not have a proper learning, if you do not have any proper cognitive component, your perception may be based on a perceptual learning on this only, or your motives and needs. But the moment you are studying something, the moment you are learning something, going through the books, going through the educational materials, that time you will see that your perception is actually molding. You will have a modified version of the perception, but the perception will definitely mold from or moderate from one particular type of perception to another. So this way, the different factors of the perception can be explained. In our next lecture session, we shall continue with the remaining portion of the perception. Till that point of time, thank you very much. Stay indoor and stay safe.